Hey guys, and welcome back to another Cultured Boys discussion. I'm Pepe, and I'm joined by Nathan. And today we're going to be doing another one of the episodes that we did a couple weeks back called Cultured Boys Explains. Where, like last episode we did of this, I explained slice of life, manga, and anime. This week it's Nathan's turn.
Yay!
Not to explain slice of life, but to to explain your choice of genre, Nathan. So, what is your choice of genre of anime and
The
manga?
genre I shall be explaining to Pepe is the martial arts genre. One I am very familiar with, and one that does sort of permeate a little bit into a lot of other franchises, but we're talking ones that are mainly martial arts focused. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's because like I do know some martial arts manga and anime, but you're definitely the guy that I'd go to for this kind of stuff if I was gonna look for recommendations
Yeah,
on it.
that it's kind of my bread and butter when it comes to like manga and anime.
So, like, is there any like off the bat? Are there any a select few at all that you go to for like your choice? Because obviously, like when I had like a few suggest ones for my slice of life, but what would be like your favorite martial arts manga and anime? And does
I-
Dragon Ball count in this as well?
it
Because obviously Dragon Ball
does.
started, but then it got a bit more like fantasy
See,
kind of.
so that sort of also plays into like how I split it, because with the martial arts manga or like anime, I normally would be like, so what do you want, fantastical or more realistic?
Hmm.
Because when it comes to series that are like hand-to-hand combat, yeah, you can just do a realistic one and that's fine, it'll work. Or you
Yeah.
can go, a little more crazy, some supernatural stuff. So you got your Dragon Balls and your Fisted North Stars, a little more
Yeah.
crazy, a little more like out
Hmm.
there, things like your Ranma halves, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then you've got like your more grounded ones that are like a little more realistic. So, like Hajime no Ippo, or to some extent History's Strongest Disciple, or like Hinomaru's Sumo, like stuff like that, where it's a little more like, okay, yeah, you know what they're doing and it is based in an actual like combat sport or martial art, but
Hmm.
they've got this slight fantastical element because it's like, they got named moves and like this guy is that and that and that, but
Yeah.
it's not like Dragon Ball where they're flying and they've got ki, or Fist of the North Star where their techniques explode you from the inside or tear you from the outside, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah. So, like, one of my questions was like, I'd be like, obviously you're very familiar with the different like fighting martial arts mangas and stuff and
yes,
anime. Um, but like for something for like Hajime no Ippo or Hinamaru Zumo, for example, sports that certainly I wouldn't be that knowledgeable on.
yes.
I love Hinamaru Zumo, but I have like no knowledge on sumo wrestling, all techniques and stuff like that. And same with boxing, really. I have no idea. Like it, like until like today, where like we'll talk about this a bit later, where Nathan has asked me to watch Hajime no Ippo.
Yes.
So I have watched episodes. So I like I haven't seen it before, so that's that. But we'll get back to that later. But my question is, obviously with those sort of manga and anime, they give you a little rundown of the sport itself
Yeah.
and the rules that like go inside or whatever. Like, have you ever been like invested in real life sports like sumo or boxing like that? Like, has it or like is it vice versa? Did you jump on this not knowing anything about the sport, find out more, get interested in it, or did you know the sport beforehand and read the manga? Like, is there any
So
what's that?
for those two specific examples,
Yeah.
I had like bare minimum knowledge. Like I knew of each sport. I sort of knew what it looked like and what sort of happens,
Hmm.
but I hadn't had like interest beforehand. And then like saw clips of Hajime no Ippo and was like, "What is that? That looks really cool."
Hmm.
I started reading it and got a bit invested in boxing. And as most people do, you go through a phase where you're like, oh, I want to get healthier, a bit more fit. What can I do? And it's like, oh, boxing looked pretty good. So there were several times in that instance where I almost took up boxing.
Jeez.
Um,
Okay.
Never actually got as far as to actually do it, but I thought about
Yeah.
it. And definitely sumo always seemed kind of like interesting in a way because it was like
Mhm.
mysterious until Hinamaru Zumo, where you actually learn more of the intricacies of the sport itself, and that in
Mhm.
itself definitely did spark like more of an interest. Which I mean, you can agree on. Well, after we both started reading it, and the last time we took a trip to Japan, like
Yeah.
we were gonna go watch a sumo match, but tickets sold out. So we went and did a sumo experience instead. We watched some.
We did, yeah.
We went to one of the stables and watched a bunch of the wrestlers like train. And like yeah, you might have done that outside of having any interest in sumo just because, it's Japanese culture. But like I
Mhm.
know for a fact, like for us specifically, reading that manga sort of played into that, like
Yeah, you like, we know that there's, like, some knowledge of it at least. Like, because I think the first time I went to Japan, like, I went to, it is Ryogoku, innit?
yeah.
Is it Ryogoku? Yeah. Um, we went there and, like, we had a look around, and I had, like, some knowledge of the sumo stuff, but, like, barely anything, and then next time we went, um, I had a bit more knowledge of it. I was like, "Oh, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. I know a bit more." So it's interesting how as bad as weird as it may sound or whatever. Like some people probably hear this and like, "Really? You really learned this?" Like reading this kind of manga like Hinamaru Zumo does educate you on the sport a little bit, even if like it's from a fantastical like
Yeah,
perspective and like a heightened perspective, arguably as well. But, you do learn stuff. You do learn
yeah,
stuff.
it's not a bad source material because
Yeah.
again, it's a little more grounded. It's not as if you were
Mhm.
like, I don't know, like for example, let's say you wanted to get into wrestling, right?
Yeah.
But like not like the actual like sport of wrestling, but like you wanted to be
Mhm.
like in WWE or something, right? But all you've seen is Kinniku Man. That's not going to help you,
Okay, yeah. Absolutely not.
right? That's not going to help you. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
you might be able to think of a character and a theme and stuff, but like when it comes to the actual like participation, that's not going to help you. You're going to have no knowledge, right?
Yeah, you're not gonna go out there, like, doing the Kaniku Buster or anything like
Yeah, exactly.
that.
Whereas,
Yeah.
like, I'm not saying just because I've read Hajime no Ippo, now I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna start gazelle punching and Dempsey rolling around like and taking people down. No, but it gives you more of an appreciation for the training, the effort that goes in,
Mhm.
and the sort of background of what happens in these like real life sports. And I know even though we're saying sports, these are
Mhm.
still martial arts. Like martial arts
Yeah,
are basically
absolutely.
just any hand to hand combat, really.
Yeah, like, and of what you were saying earlier, like about like the kind of realism of those two mangas, like you get guaranteed like the mangakas and authors of those have definitely done their research into it. They wouldn't have just gone in blind and
Oh
be like,
yeah,
"Oh
for
yeah, I'm
sure.
just gonna create a, a series with no prior knowledge to this whatsoever." Like, for fact, if you're writing that kind of story, you would have done research into the sport itself, like what kind of stuff goes down.
Yeah.
Obviously, to tell the story, you will have to heighten it, and it's a manga, so there's gonna be panels where like stuff is elongated, but it is based in realism at the end of the day. Like it has
I
like a real
mean,
factor to
the
it.
thing
So
is with most of the at least the ones that I've read in the martial arts like genre, there's always a slight fantastical element.
yeah,
But
you.
like the range is from like 0 to 100. Again, it
Mhm,
can go from anything to like it's a normal, set of punches, but he's given it a name. Or, it's a kick, but somebody's given it a name. To
mhm,
this guy is so special. I mean, like Hajime no Ippo is the perfect example. His
mhm,
first special punch is called the Gazelle Punch.
mhm,
But all it is he's using all the power in his legs because he's shorter than most other people to
mhm.
do an uppercut. So he goes lower and gains more kinetic energy
I get you.
and
Yeah.
then springs up. But that's called a gazelle punch because they say it looks like a
Okay.
gazelle. But then he's got
Yeah.
other characters in there. I forget the character's name, but he starts off as a villain. And basically, he's just got really long arms. So he's got like massive reach. But his special technique is literally like he can punch from weird directions because you he goes out of your field of vision. So it's like he whips you with his fist, and then it's like drawn
Okay,
like a
yeah.
whip. Or like one of the champions, Date-san, has like the spiral punch where he spins his fist as he hits you, but if he hits you in the heart and compresses your chest, which is real,
Yeah,
if you compress
yeah.
the chest enough, it causes your body to have a panic response and you shut down.
Jesus, okay.
So like it's like fantastical mixed with like real stuff.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know there was, like I didn't know certain things about that.
Yeah, like but that's kind of what I love about that sort of like this whole genre. Like depending on who's writing it and the research done, like you learn some of the weirdest things. It's always going to be like a strange little tidbit, but it's no you're never going to really sort of use that information.
Mhm.
But you're learning something, you know?
So yeah, I mean, like we said, it's kind of like what we said about Bakuman as well. Like you learn stuff. Like it is kind of based in real life, and you do pick up real life facts. Like obviously through manga, but it gets there.
Yeah,
If you're learning about it, that's learning, right?
yeah,
Something
exactly.
like it can spur you on to actually do more research and actually find out more stuff yourself if you really were that into the actual subjects itself.
Yeah, and I find that's often what it is. At
Hmm.
least for me personally, when I read, because a lot of the appeal of a martial arts manga to me is
Hmm.
most of the time when you start from the beginning, your pro tag is going to be kind of like yourself, almost like you could put yourself in that person because they don't know what's
Hmm.
going on. Some sort of situation happens, they're underdogs, and then they go off and learn for whatever reason. And then you get invested because you're watching this person or reading, like you're reading as this character grows and overcomes challenges. Like they learn new techniques, they learn philosophy from like the discipline of their chosen martial art or whatever, like there's like this whole build up. But then you also get these cool action scenes, and depending on settings, there might be tournaments, there might just be like in the case of like History's Strongest Disciple, there's just like fights that place in the streets away from everyone else. Like the underground,
Yeah.
the light side and the dark side. But there's also the humorous ones, like it's not all serious. Like we mentioned before, like Dragon Ball was probably one of the most well known martial art quote unquote mangas, at least in the beginning. And that was all comedy. Ranma Half has got his comedy, and that's martial arts. Like,
So, as someone that like has no knowledge of Run My Half whatsoever, but I've heard like literally it's one of the most famous mangas out
yeah.
there. Like, what is Run My Half? Like, I've seen it, but I've never read it, and it's big. And like, should I pick
So
this up?
it's quite an old one. So it's hard to say. I'd say you might like it more, Pepe, because it does get quite slice of lifey.
Okay, yeah.
But it's basically about the main character Ranma, who is his father, and I forget the main girl, the heroine's name, but their dads basically have set them up. There's an arranged marriage that's supposed to take place,
Hmm.
but there's all these like these pools of water, these like ponds or whatever. Some of them are cursed. Ranma's dad happens to fall in one, and every time he gets wet, he turns into a panda. Ranma falls into one, and every time he gets wet, he turns into a girl. So that's why it's called Ranma One Half or Ranma Half because he's a boy and a girl. And
Aha.
it's martial arts based because I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a long time since I've seen this series.
Hmm.
But basically, Ranma was supposed to basically marry this girl. I think her name's Akane, and her family have a dojo, from what I remember. So like, it was going to be like the marriage of two martial arts families, and basically, it's the fallout of Ranma having to come to grips with the situation of sometimes he turns into a girl when he's wet, and the fact that he has to deal with this arranged marriage that him and Akane don't want. And it's sort of like everybody's dealing with all these weird situations.
Okay, yes, it sounds quite fun then.
It is actually, it can be quite funny. And again, like I think you personally, Pepper, you might like it because it is like sort of sitcom-y, a bit slice of lifey.
Okay, yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is also a bit of a harder one to recommend sometimes because it is quite old. I believe it came out in like the 80s. So,
I think so, yeah. Like, it's one of those like legendary ones.
oh yeah, it's like super famous.
Okay, yeah, fair, fair. That's I can get a bit on you know what I'm like. I can get on board with a bit
Yeah,
of comedy, a bit of martial arts comedy. Yeah.
that's definitely one I would probably recommend to maybe someone who sort of wants to get into a series that's like martial arts theme, but maybe not so heavy on the actual like combat side of things. Like martial arts is used and it is featured, but it's not the main point. The main point is that the main character and his dad, if wet, turn into weird, like just turn into something else.
That's really interesting. But okay,
Yeah,
it's,
I,
it's,
I watched
it's an
that.
interesting concept. It's a really interesting
I
concept.
watched that back when I was like 12, so it's a long,
Yeah,
long time ago.
a bit hazy. Okay, yeah. I'm kind of surprised they didn't make it to the West in that kind of sense. But do you think it was just because it was too old at that point that we didn't see it anywhere?
It did though. I watched it from a family member who had it on DVD. Like,
Wait, so like back on TV kind of thing? You
oh,
know,
on
we
TV,
obviously we had
probably it's probably because it was a bit old, but also
yeah.
probably because at the time when we were watching stuff on TV, like that probably was a bit too weird to go
I
even
get
as
that.
like even for
Yeah.
anime to go on after 9 o'clock after watershed, like it would still be too weird because it's like, hang on, why is that guy a girl now, and
Yeah.
why is that guy into the girl that was a boy, and
It was kind
why
of still when like the West was kind of like when we were like the younger. It was like we were just about were getting Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's also old, sort of older Japanese humor. So there's still a lot of situations where it's like, haha, somebody walked in whilst Ranma's changing, but Ranma's a girl now. But because he's a guy before, he doesn't know about underpants. Like,
oh goodness me.
or, like, oh, Ranma was a girl and then he dried off or got hit with hot water. Now he's back as a guy, but all the girls were around. Like, again, sitcom
Okay,
kind
yeah,
of.
that kind of yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
Japanese.
can imagine why it didn't come over with everything
Okay,
else,
yeah,
despite its
yeah.
like status. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, those small explanations in itself sort of tell you
Yeah.
everything.
So like when we first started this channel, like we were like we did a video of like what our top five manga and anime
Yep.
series were. And two of yours, like quite near the top, from what I remember, were Dragon Ball and Fist and North Star.
Yes,
I think they were actually the top two, if I
I
remember.
believe they were my top two. Yes.
Yeah. So obviously those are very fantastical. Like have a bit more of a fantasy element to them. Like Dragon Ball a bit more later on, like Dragon Ball Z more than later on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously Fist and North Star is yeah, like there's heads blown up and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But like, would you say from that you would always more likely go towards a fantasy martial arts manga rather than a grounded, more realistic one?
I wouldn't actually say I lean one way or the other. To be fair,
Hmm.
um, those two are my favorites or my top two, just because of how long I've been familiar with the franchises. Like
Hmm.
Dragon Ball was my first ever anime, so like it holds a very special place, you know. And been living the whole like sort of Dragon Ball franchise ever since I was like 4 years old. Story's been told, but yeah, like Dragon Ball. So that one's, it could not have any of that stuff, and I probably still like it because I actually do quite enjoy the original Dragon Ball before, when it was still like martial arts and not so heavy on ki and stuff.
Hmm.
Fist of the North Star is one of my favorites, just because at the time when I was reading it, I was like 15, 16. So it's kind of like that perfect time where you're like, oh, I really want violence and gore, and it's got a story and it's an okay story, but like it's mostly about watching Kenshiro walk around blowing heads up and
Yeah.
beating up other people. Even though he's righteous, he is on the side of good, but still Hokuto Shinken is the ultimate assassin fist. So, you know. But again, I wouldn't say I lean one way or the other. I think personally, I just enjoy the action of it all, the growth of the characters,
Mhm.
interactions, and sort of sometimes I find it interesting how a character might overcome a certain combat situation because it's like it comes down to like the mental aspect and technique rather than like sometimes the raw strength of a person.
I get that. I guess it is like obviously it is all about the fights and it's like the underdog like championing over someone that is
Yeah,
obviously tougher, like stuff like you said before.
it's like
Yeah. It's the journey really, because obviously, like you said, it's someone that starts off in the series at a very minimal knowledge or like a special skill, but like really basic knowledge of what's going to happen, and
yeah,
then the build
exactly.
up. Really, yeah, I get
It's
that.
that, and it's also like sometimes you just get like it's really strange origins. Like one of my favorite from a little while ago was a manga called Karate Shokoshu Kohinata Minoru,
Haha.
and it's about this guy Minoru, or everyone calls him by his surname Kohinata, right?
Mhm.
He was actually a gymnast, and he's always been quite a meek guy, but he's very nimble and very flexible.
Mhm.
He has a girlfriend who he gets into a fight because some guy tries to assault his girlfriend, but he gets beat up and he doesn't like that he can't defend his girlfriend and that he also can't defend himself.
Yeah.
Everyone takes the piss because he's a meek guy, he's a nice guy. And so he
Mhm.
decides to join the karate club. And through his like flexibility, he can pull off some like fancier moves. I believe it was like this sort of like roundhouse like axe kick.
Uh huh.
That was like his signature move for a long time because most karatekas can't do that because they focus more on the actual forms. So they're not like
Mm.
flexible enough to do this like weird kick that's a one off.
Interesting. Yeah.
But Kohinata, throughout the entire series, his biggest problem was because he was a gymnast before, he doesn't have the actual like physical strength to do a lot of damage. But he always sort of relied on his speed and flexibility.
Mhm.
And it often you sort of saw him have to really work for his wins. But because you were reading it as it happens, you sort of felt like his win was your win and it was like a really good payoff. And that one's also probably one of the more grounded ones that I've ever read, like more probably one of the more realistic ones in my opinion, because they didn't really have like special moves or anything.
How long ago did this come out? Like, do you know how old this manga is?
I believe that came out in the late 2000s and finished I think around 2010ish, 2011.
Oh wow, so it had a, like a kind of short run then.
Yeah, it has a sequel series, but I hadn't gotten around to reading it.
Yeah. Okay.
It sort of still has Minoru in it, and it sort of focuses on him, but there's like a new character as well. But I hadn't got that
Okay.
far.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But it does sound quite interesting as a concept, actually. Like the transition from one sport to another does sound quite fun.
Plus, I also learned that like when you're a karateka or like a practitioner of karate, if you want to make that like a profession, typically they end up taking up kickboxing and becoming like
Hmm.
kickboxers as well. I didn't know that before that. It's really random information to know. But like
Fair. That is quite interesting. Like, just yeah, real life
yeah.
stuff.
And
Real.
then like yeah, they do that and then it become they transition into MMA and then yeah, it's like a whole thing. It's like a whole progression level I didn't even know about. I just thought you did karate until you sort of got bored or finished and then was like, yeah, I'm done. Like I guess you could do like Olympics. Karate's in the Olympics, isn't it?
I think so. Was it judo?
I don't remember.
I think it's. I swear judo is, isn't it? I don't know. Yeah, but that's the that's the thing. Um, I wanted to talk quickly about the anime you recommended, as I
Yes.
said earlier as well. Hajime no Ippo. So
Ah, classic.
this series is still ongoing, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and from when we started, I remember when we were back in like sixth form, like school together, like this is like in its like thousands of chapters, right?
When we were in sixth form, it was coming up to 1,000. I remember it was a big deal when it finally hit 1,000 because it was the first one most of us had ever known that had that many chapters.
Yeah. So it was one of those ones that, oh, you go start reading this. It's like, yeah. It's like basically the meme of what One Piece is right now.
Pretty
It was like,
much.
oh, would you want to start One Piece because it's got this many, like this much content? But Hajime no Ippo at the time had already reached that 1,000 chapter mark or whatever, like or was approaching it. Um, but yeah, you recommended me to read or watch a part of this, didn't you?
Yes, because typically if I'm going to try and convince someone about like a martial arts series or sort of like a cool action anime, I tend to think of Hajime no Ippo because I think it's got some really cool scenes, which is why you probably often have seen the clips all over the internet. I was gonna say just on YouTube, but like all over the place because it's animated really well, and plus because it's like realistic with a hint of fantasy. So like,
Yeah.
whenever Ippo is in a fight and he gets that go ahead and does that Dempsey roll, and you see all of that like wind moving with his fists, and each hit, like you just feel the impact of everything,
hmm
and it like just really gets you hyped for everything that's going on in that scene just then. And that's why I wanted Pepe to watch it because that's what I really feel when I'm
hmm
experiencing the martial arts genre is that hype level each time, like that excitement to see something happen.
So like it's a bit of a weird one for me because my only access to Hajime no Ippo was basically to watch it on Crunchyroll.
Yep.
And the way that the Hajime no Ippo anime starts, the one that's available on Crunchyroll anyway, because I think it's called Hajime no Ippo uh the I can't remember, like it's got like a subtitle,
Yeah,
like
I
a secondary
think
title.
the
I can't remember
one
what it is.
available to us on Crunchyroll might be partway into the series.
It definitely is. uh, I think it's called The Fighting or something like that. Hajime no Ippo The Fighting, I believe it's called.
I
Um,
don't remember.
but
Anyway,
anyway, yeah. So it starts where he's already become champion. Spoiler alert, I guess. But
yeah, I
uh,
mean, spoilers are
and
not because it's like it's an old series too.
yeah, and at this point, he's defending his title for the fourth time. So I don't know
Uh,
how far along the series that
I
is.
don't remember. It's been a while since I read Hajime no Ippo as well. I think the furthest I ever got was maybe 800 something chapters in, and that was quite a while ago.
Yeah. So what it did with this episode, like for like just a little rundown, because you've read the manga, you haven't watched the anime at all, I assume,
I've only ever
Nathan.
watched clips, but yeah, I
Yeah.
read the manga.
So where this starts out, I believe it must be the anime must have taken a break at some point and it came back.
I think so because I think that's maybe after where I've read. I don't
Oh,
know.
okay,
Like
really? Okay.
I don't remember if I've seen him become champion because the last thing I remember clearly in my head was that he was trying to become champion.
Okay, yeah.
But like it's not really a spoiler even to me because like
hmm
as the progression of things go, he was gonna become champion.
Yeah. I mean, this is like kind of like him defending his belt for the fourth time.
Yeah, and that might depends on which belt it is as well. Like because it might just be like the Japan featherweight champion because he was a featherweight. I mean, it's
Yeah,
from
yeah.
this series that I learned the different like weight classes of boxing. Like I only
hmm
sort of knew what heavyweight was, but
Yeah.
I didn't understand anything else. But yeah, so like maybe I don't know, maybe he's finally where that anime picks up, maybe he finally became the world featherweight champion and he's
Mm,
defending his title there. I know when I was reading he hadn't yet cuz
okay.
the current featherweight champion was just this like absolute. beast of a person, like undefeated for ages, and was basically heralded almost as like the Grim Reaper of boxing because he like utterly destroys you to the point where you just
Mhm.
give up the sport.
Okay. Jeez.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one, like with the anime, the way it started off, because it's episode one of the fighting, and it's like it starts off with Ippo's backstory with
Yep.
his dad, and obviously like that's probably like the first 10 minutes of it. And
Okay, that's probably that's definitely further because I don't remember
really,
ever seeing his dad. Because like at the
not even
very,
the backstory at all.
I don't think so. Because at the very, I know he's him and his mum run a fishing boat,
Yeah.
and that's why he had good balance, and that's why people reckoned he would be good at boxing.
So yeah, I did not know any of this. So is this? I just assumed the whole thing was like a retelling, just so people could catch up of his backstory. But clearly,
No,
this is just like okay, it's
this is
actually
like
just
actual. So basically, Ippo helps his family business. He had no interest in boxing, and then he was getting beat up one day.
hmm
He was getting bullied, and then one of the senpai from the gym that he ends up going to and being a
hmm
member of comes along, scares the guys away,
hmm
and Ippo sort of gets enamored with the way the guy was moving.
hmm
And yeah, that's how the boxing starts. He goes and finds out
Okay,
the
yeah.
guy's a boxer, and I think, if I remember correctly, like Tamura said something to the effect of like try and catch the leaves falling from the tree
Uh-huh.
and try and catch 10 leaves or something. And Ippo just keeps practicing and practicing. He's got good foundation because he works on his family's like small fishing boat all the time and he carries loads of stuff for everybody. So like
hmm
he's built and he's also like got good like footing. So like got a good basis for boxing or something.
hmm
It again is a long time since I've read the start of Hajime no Ippo, but that's basically like the breakdown of why he started.
That's nuts because I didn't get any of that from the first episode that I watched. It literally where I started. It's like it's thrown in. There's a bit of backstory about his dad, and then yeah, some guy comes after his belt. His name is Iwo Shimabukuro. He is also like he's fighting Ippo because he's also a son of the sea, is how he describes
Oh,
it.
maybe
Yeah.
no, I know, I remember that bit then. So it's not super far in if it's where I think it is, because that Shimabukuro was the first person to give Ippo a different challenge. Basically, like I told you before, in that world, Ippo has always been shorter than most of the other boxers. So his advantage was that they couldn't see him a lot of the time because they had to look down, which is why his gazelle punch worked because he always could go lower to the ground than anyone else. But that fight was hard for Ippo because Shimabukuro is actually shorter than him, and it was the first one of the first times Ippo ever had to fight someone shorter than him, and he never experienced that before.
See, they don't bring this up at all. Like this comes the way the anime tells it is that like Shimabukuro puts out a statement saying he will be the one to defeat the Dempsey role.
Yeah, because Shimabukuro is like a rock.
Yeah. But like he doesn't actually say how he's gonna do it, and then they just jump straight into they might cut a
I
lot of
mean,
stuff around it
maybe they
because
do, or maybe it's in other like following episodes or something. But like the context to all of that is basically Shimabukuro is like known for being like a stonewall.
yeah, he's hench as
So
hell,
he
yeah.
just like yeah, he just like turtles up and he tanks all the hits, and then basically when you're tired, he starts wailing on you. So his plan was to just like do that against the Dempsey roll, and then when Ippo's tired, because Dempsey roll takes a lot of energy, because you're doing what's it? You're doing like a lot of swaying
Yeah.
along with your hooks. So each sway, you throw a hook as well, so you get all the momentum, and then it's like a much tougher punch. But like that's quite like early on in Ippo's like professional boxing career. So he's
Yeah.
he sort of got it down, but he still gets tired from it. He can't Dempsey roll too much. But that one became that was a really good fight too, because it
Mm.
basically was two guys turtling up against each other, exchanging blows and just holding their breath. It's like waiting for the first person to just give up. It was a game. It was like a match of chicken. Like,
It was literally that, like, it was like who can hold out longer. So they both of them had like the amount of stamina, like, or whatever. It's just see who can hold out longer, basically, which is quite interesting. The thing is about the anime as well is that like this really felt well paced. Oh, well, in some cases, I don't know if well paced is the word. Fast paced is definitely the word for it because this whole fight goes over 2 episodes,
yeah,
and obviously, as I said, like the first half of the first episode is backstory and him learning that his belt's being challenged. Um, and what happens is after the first episode, I watched that one, and it ends on a kind of cliffhanger, and I was like, well, I kind of want to see what happens next, and I was genuinely like engrossed in it. I was watching like, okay, shit, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen next? Like, it got to like round 5 or whatever,
hmm,
and then it's like either one's letting up, and then one of them slips, and I think it was Ippo that slips up by like
yeah,
slightly, and that's where it's like, oh, shit, he's actually gonna go down, he's gonna lose his title, and like you can see like all the crowds reacting to it as well, like, oh my god, no, don't lose it, like
yeah,
everyone's on his side, and then like he pulls it back, and that's in the space of the second episode, like, so also you're wondering this whole time, like this Shibabukuro has issued a statement saying he's going to defeat the Dempsey role, and for the whole time, like Ippo's not doing the Dempsey role because he's so scared that
it's gonna get busted up. Yeah,
yeah, so he's not doing it, and Ippo gets pushed to the edge. He's like, I'm going to do it, and that's when the whole blow for blow exchanges comes through, and that's when you get like, oh crap, what is going to happen in this next fight? It is like you said, like with an art martial arts manga, it really does engross you in the action, and it keeps you guessing. It doesn't feel like, oh, it's a one-sided fight. This feels like Ippo could generally just lose his title right now, and like he's like both characters had one loss by the sounds of it. They had like kind of very similar
yeah,
records. It's only that
yeah. They
Ippo had
basically
like
like
the
almost were like the exact same fighter, just from
yeah,
different parts of the country.
yeah, and it's good though. Like it is really interesting as a the first 2 episodes I saw. Like it is like I do want to see more, but I also kind of want to know more about the backstory as well because there's a whole bunch of characters in there.
Yeah, you won't know. You won't know any of them.
And
Yeah.
I was like, they had they had like major lines, and then there's his coach as well. I want to know like how his
Oh
like
yeah,
all the stuff about his
coach.
coach.
Dang.
Yeah, and then there's like the assistants, and then like
Yeah.
I just wanted to know more about these characters. It's a shame that I could wasn't able to start off at the original start of the series, because I think I actually would have been really great. Like this kind of felt like, you know, when you first watch, like you probably have a different scenario than me, but when I first watched Dragon Ball Z, you're thrown into these characters and everyone kind of knows each other. Krillin knows Goku, and then they're like, "Hey, Krillin, how's it going?" And you're like, "Oh, okay, these guys just know each other. That's fair." Obviously, they have a backstory you don't know about, and that's how it felt watching the Hajime no Ippo
Yeah.
the fight.
I
I was
can
just
imagine
like,
that'd be really weird, especially by that point. Ippo's been with the gym for a long time. He's got all his
yeah,
senpai. There's like I don't think Mura's around by that point anymore. Or whatever his like rival's called. But like he had a rival as well from the same gym who ends up like getting better than him every turn. Like, but you see why I told you to get like watch this one out of any, because this
yeah,
one really like you just get sucked in. It's so good. There's a reason why. Like anyone who has seen it, if you tell them or mention Hajime no Ippo, there's normally not a bad thing to be said, and that's why to explain this genre, I was like, I have to get you to experience it.
yeah. It's really enjoyable. I'll tell you what, it kind of does throw me back to like something like History's Strongest Disciple a little bit,
Yeah,
but this feels more grounded. And like it's right, like you're right. It's always about how the character overcomes a new hurdle in his way or her way or whatever. And it's interesting. It is a really interesting manga. I kind of just want to. I do want to say I want to carry on with it, but it's tough for me because I don't know the whole backstory, and I kind of want to know
yeah.
more. Like maybe I could read the manga somewhere or something if I can find a
I
source.
think also the anime has been done a fair few different times, so that it's been split
Yeah.
up like probably a million different ways.
It's so tough to like navigate that, especially when you like you want to get into a new series like that. It's like how where do I start? Like you have to do your proper research sometimes when it comes
Yeah,
to, especially if an older manga like this. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it.
I'm glad you did. I'm really really happy you did because that's Hajime no Ippo is one of my like top 5 martial arts. If I had to say like that list,
Nah, I get that. What would be your top three then of like if it was like martial arts? Like what would your top three be?
oh,
If you were gonna tell anyone, like kind of recommendations, kind of mix like top three, what would you go for?
I would say still Dragon Ball, still Fist and North Star,
Yeah.
and then third probably would be Hajime no Ippo. To be fair, it's real close. I
Okay. Yeah.
almost said Karate Shokoshu or
Yeah.
Shikoshi Kohinata Minoru, but that one's a little more, as far as I ever knew, no one else had ever heard of it. So Hajime no Ippo is a little more well known. I feel like it's a little more accessible. And there's other ones I didn't even mention, but they're like they're they're even more unknown. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if there's like any particular one that's unknown, like that you think is very niche, what would you recommend? Like if like everyone's looking for a series they've never heard of before, martial arts one, what the like a really good niche one? What would you recommend?
It's another boxing one, but I really liked a series called Rikudo,
Hmm.
and it's basically this kid called Rikudo who has been like living just the shittest life. Like it's dad did not care, beat him all the time, but like this kid was basically trained to have like a killer spirit. So when he boxes, he is cold hearted. He doesn't think about the other person at all. He is about getting the most effective killer punches in.
Wow. Okay.
So the kid has to basically like prize fight to survive until he gets taken into a proper gym, and he has to like it's basically he then gets to live like a normal life, and he has to sort of relearn everything and get rid of these like killer instincts.
Hmm.
But that I really really enjoyed that one. I was also it's a little more well known than that. I feel like it's actually one of the better known ones, and you've probably also heard of it too, because it used to turn up a lot. At one point, I was reading Tough, and I don't know why I stopped reading that one. I think that one's also boxing, but that might be MMA.
Okay. Yeah. It does ring a bell.
Like if I showed you a
Although yeah.
picture of it, you probably would recognize it. We used to see it a lot, but just
Yeah.
back then, none of us ever touched
I
it
feel
for
like you've
whatever
definitely
reason.
mentioned this before as well. It sounds really
Yeah,
familiar.
I was reading it
Yeah.
for a little while. I think I maybe read like 20 or 30 chapters, and for whatever reason I stopped. But yeah, like for an unknown one, I'd say Rikudo. And
Hmm.
then like, I've probably mentioned so many different ones in this episode alone and just in general when talking about things. Like I put it on the list, but from our manhwa episode, The Breaker as well, that whole series,
Yeah. I remember.
that's martial arts. A little fantastical, but that's also martial arts. So if you're into manhwa, that's a good one. And then there's also, I guess it's underground now because it's also dead. But Neru, Way of the Martial Artist from earlier in the year,
Oh
I
yeah.
liked it. I thought it was good, but no one else did, so that's why it's dead. Another one on my list of dead manga.
R.I.P. Fair man. But yeah, but is there anything else you'd recommend about like what you'd think anyone else would be missing out on martial
um,
arts? Like, if you would say like a final word, I guess, about this, what would it be?
I would say go and try any of the series I've mentioned. If at any point you've heard one of the descriptions I gave or a small explanation of one of them and you think you might like what you heard, please do go and try it. They are all really good series and they all have like the same sort of like overarching story. the main character is participating for whatever reason to become the best of the best. For whatever reason, it's always something different. But you do always get some good side characters, great character interaction, growth, and you always get to see some cool fights. And let's face it, that's the most important part.
That is true. It's what you want there. That's what you want.
Plus, a lot of the ones I mentioned also have animes. So,
Yeah.
like Hinomaru Sumo, Fist of the North Star, Hajime no Ippo, Dragon Ball, obviously, Ranma Half, like History's Strongest Disciple. Lots of them have animes, so if you don't want to read, you can watch it.
It's accessible for everyone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fair, man. Well, should we end it there, do you think? Is it
Yeah,
a good point in there? Yeah.
I think that's a good time to start saying thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, hit that bell button so you get notified of when our videos come out. Check us out on podcast platforms and follow us on Twitter. All the links are in the description, and we will catch you next week for another Cultured Boys. Bye.
Bye.